After Queen of Hatred Dawn carried my team through my first ever Mirror Dungeon Extreme attempt, I got to work planning how to get her to solo it. Now I had never done a Mirror Dungeon solo run before. I didn't realise how difficult it was going to be. Except, when you know what you're doing, it can actually be easier and faster as a solo run. For those of you who know how this is done, or aren't interested in the setup I used, feel free to use the timestamps in the pinned comment or description to skip ahead to the beginning of the run. For those of you who asked for a tutorial, stick around. Originally I was going to do a deep dive into this section of the video covering everything, but truthfully it just got too long, and I've only done one run. Let me get a couple more runs under my belt so I can iron out some of the script, make it more general rather than just for Dawn, and I'll get to work on a video as soon as I can. For now, we need to talk about the basics. While you can try the Leroy Jenkins approach, as I did at first, you will probably get no further than the first fight. One reason for this is an improper team. Yes, you are soloing it with your character, but you still need to think about all the support passives you're bringing to allow them to actually complete the run. Passives activate in one of two ways, through Sin Resonance, or just for owning enough of that sin. If a passive requires 3 Gluttony Resonance for example, and you don't have a Gluttony skill, well that's a useless passive. However, if it requires 3 Gluttony Sin owned, we can work around that in the next stage of planning. There are some great general support IDs that you can use in pretty much any run, and those are the ones we're going to be focusing on in this section of the video. Chef Ryoshu is the first important one to mention. For owning 5 Lust, the ally with the least HP heals 15 HP when an enemy is defeated. Barber Otis is quite similar. For owning 5 Lust, the ally with the fastest speed heals 10 HP twice per turn when an enemy is killed. The last healing support passive comes from G Corp Gregor. For owning 4 Gluttony, the ally with the least HP heals 5 HP after winning a clash, and this does not have a limit. The last idea I want to mention for general runs is Base Mersault, who very simply causes the ally with the highest max HP to take 10% less damage from attacks for owning 3 Sloth. Zwei Sinclair's worth an honourable mention. For owning 4 Sloth, apply 1 haste and 3 defense levels up. I will also give an honourable mention to Regret Faust. For owning 5 Wrath, the target of the slowest ally has -1 clash power if they have 3 types of negative effects on them. If you can think of any other great support IDs, please leave them in the comments section down below. But with support IDs now behind us, we can talk about the trio of ego gifts that make the run go from impossible to doable to downright easy. The first issue you'll have is acquiring the sins to activate all these passives. This is where the blue Zippo lighter will save the day. At the start of your turn, this gift will gain 1 Gloom Ego resource and 1 resource for 2 other random affinities. Given enough turns, this will fuel all of your passives. So loaded with this information, you go into a run, and every single fight starts with your ID getting 1 attack to the enemy's many attacks. Turn 1 ends and you've been staggered, causing you to die turn 2. Introducing the mana-shaped music box. At the end of your turn, when staggered, recover from stagger. I decided that because this was my first solo attempt, there's no shame in making it as easy as it gets. I knew that there was one more ego gift that really trivializes solo runs, so I thought while I'm still learning how all of this sort of works, I will use the one gift to rule them all. Thanks to the latest Walpurgis Night, we have been provided with a gift called Ashen Constellation's Blessing. At the start of the turn, gain 2 protection, but more importantly, adjust any attack type resistances exceeding 1 to 1, meaning no damage type is fatal against you anymore. With the right team behind your ID and these 3 starting gifts at your disposal, we can now finally start talking about the flaws you should pick. Some flaws mentioned here are specific to Queen of Hatred Dawn. Others are fantastic general choices you should pick on every single run. Flaw 1, I took Faith and Erosion for the gift Blood Red Mane. This affects all IDs with Wrath or Lust affinity skills. If this ID did not take damage from enemies last turn, gain 2 haste and 2 defense up. However, if you did take damage, you gain 2 bind but 2 clash power. Clash power is extremely important. The better you can clash, the easier you will find this run. The comments on my last video actually told me to look into offense levels, and so I did. Every 3 offense levels equals 1 clash power, and there are a lot of gifts that can give you offense levels. And this is something to bear in mind when you're choosing trials as well. Giving your enemies base power and coin power, for example, can be very dangerous, which is why it's always recommended to not pick brutality. Personally, I think HP, offense levels, defense powers, even final power to a degree, aren't as scary options, and I tend to lean towards those trials instead. Flaw 2 is Hell's Chicken. The gift Sharp Needle and Thread can deal a ridiculous amount of damage, especially for attacks with high attack weight. You can get it from an event on this floor, but it's not guaranteed you'll ever see this event, so I personally make sure that this gift is a reward from beating the floor. The event that can result in a Sharp Needle gift can also give you Tango Marinade, which increases your clash power. The other event will reward you with 2 tier 3 chicken rewards that could be amazing for fusing early tier 4 gifts if you don't need either one of them for the added burn or rupture. Flaw 3 for my run was Hatred and Despair. If you did not take Blessing with the gift search at the start of the run, you can find it here, but I wanted the gift Spent Use Forming Hate, giving allies offense levels when consuming charge count. Flaw 4, I would recommend line 2 Mobius for the tier 4 gift Bridle, giving allies an increase to their max HP. But flaws 5 through to 10 ultimately depend on what the game throws you. These flaws are where you start basically picking gifts that will empower your ID the most. For me, it'd be largely Sinking and Charge, but you'll be surprised with how many other keywords you actually start diving into to get those extra offense levels. For me, on Flaw 5, I was thrown a Sunk Gloom with 2 really good tier 4 gifts. If you ever see line 3 with the Unhatched Embers tier 4 gift, take that. It is a literal cheat death that will stop your ID from going below 1 HP the first time they are about to be killed. Line 1 can give False Halo, giving your ID stacks of Diana for an extra 1% damage per stack. With a craftable tier 4 Tremor gift, Downpour, any team can make use out of Melted Eyeball and Bell of Truth to inflict defense down and fragile to all enemies. So keep an eye out for both of these gifts. And then of course there are crafted tier 4 gifts for your respective damage type and Lunar Memory, or the heaps of poise gifts that any team can use, which is why I even opted to run the Evil Defining to get the Harpoon prosthetic leg to fuse into the Guiding Gas Lamp. The final 5 flaws are interesting, because there are actually a lot of free theme packs if you can do enough damage. Bride of Affinity, Efflorescent Greenery, Who Couldn't Be Blood Fiends, and even some of the railway flaws can be really easy, but I was told to save C for the last flaw, as that was really easy for my run. My last tip is don't be afraid to use egos and force corrosion. When there are no allies to be hit, corroding on a turn when we have 2 or 3 attacks will give you several free ego uses, staggering or even killing everybody on the opposite side. In future, to make sure that I understand how these solo runs work, I will be picking harder IDs, specifically IDs with less attack weight. But for now, let's get on to the run. Flaw 1 was the hardest flaw, believe it or not, so we're not going to skip over the fights to the boss, but I will shorten them. The bleeds from the N-Corp coupled with the passives not actually having the sins to activate makes the fights a little bit tricky, but soon enough Dawn was fully online and the run can begin. For those of you who saw my first MDE run, you should know that I said I'd be opening up the ego gifts list at the start of every fight. I forgot. After resetting a few times due to bleeds, we made it to the boss, which is where I discovered a fantastic trick, even if it was by accident. By corroding at the end of the previous fight, we get to start with a free ego at the lowest possible sanity, staggering one of the enemies while we whittle down the other one. The enemy's attacks can paralyze, bind and bleed, so I focus on the attacks that will leave the most bleed stacks and paralyze, as I'm likely to be in positive sanity form for a little while. 1 arm down, 2 arms down, 1 enemy down, 2 enemies down. Picking up Blood Red Mane and lowest star. We find Hell's Chicken with the Sharp Needle and Thread as a reward, before picking up Tango Marinade from an event. During the shop sequence, we pick up a handful of random gifts, including Curriculum Vitae, before fighting the Chicken Man. We opened up with an ego, but I really misjudged my damage, killing all of the man-eating chickens in one hit and almost taking out Papa Bongi in the process. Next turn, thanks to corroding, we get a free ego that finishes the job. We grab the Sharp Needle and Thread along with Skeletal Crumbs for a massive boost in damage, before entering the floor Hatred and Despair, where the events on the way reward us with Spent Use Forming Hate and Trauma Shield. The shopping phase rewards us with our first Poise gift and a fantastic tier 3 charge gift. The boss of this floor is super interesting, thanks to the free teammate, and the fact there are actually only 4 attacks before you stagger the boss. So we can play this slow and build up extra attacks before we stagger the boss. On top of that, the boss applies Sinking, helping to push Don into regressed form for the AoE on skill 3. However, we don't have magical arcana stacks, and we cannot use skill 3 to generate them, so our skill 3-2 is actually only 1 attack weight. What we can do is use an ego skill to do big AoE damage and force us to corrode next turn, giving us 3 egos, letting us finish off the main boss next turn even though she still has souls alive. I promise this whole video isn't just ego spamming, by the way. I just didn't have enough faith in Dawn at first, but I came to realise that she will win without egos. We grab Sword Sharp into his tears and Fiery down before taking line 2 Mobius for the bridal gift. On the way to the boss we get an event that destroys Dawn's sanity, so now we get a free corrosion at the start of the boss fight. The second shopping phase allows us to get our first skill replacement for Dawn, giving us 1 more skill 3 and 1 less skill 1. When trying to fuse the charged gauntlets, we got one of the needed blunt gifts, which honestly, I'm completely okay with. The boss fails to even break our shield after eating an ego, and summons an envy flower, which I'm fairly sure is a good thing as it could have summoned a wrath, which I remember being quite scary. The flower doesn't seem to do anything scary, but I clash with it anyway, just to be safe, before choosing one of the enemy's gluttony skill 3s with my own skill 3. The following turn lets us clash with 3 of the enemy's skills. While we didn't stagger, we took basically no damage, and from here on out we can clash with every single attack, so it's not long before we've won the fight. Floor 5 throws a Sunk Gloom with 2 fantastic tier 4 gifts, one that gives us a lot more damage and sync application, the other provides ID levels. The shop throws us some charge type gauntlets, so now I'm really glad we failed to craft it earlier. In fact, our luck has been so insanely good this whole run. I feel like there's this guardian angel watching over me. Everything that goes wrong feels like it was for a good reason, and this is no exception. Thank you, Limbus gods! We fuse Clear Mirror Calm Water before facing off against the Earl King Heathcliff. Speaking of which, somewhere out there is an Earl King Don Holiday, set out to destroy all other Don Holidays. If I'm to disappear one day, you know who did it. We clash with Heathcliff, as I'm not worried about the damage from the henchman. This turn, however, one of the henchmen is replaced by Josephine, which is a little scarier. Our skill 3 deals insane damage to Heathcliff, and we stagger Josephine in 1 hit. The next turn, we finish off Heathcliff, with no issues. Onto the infinite floors, after grabbing Artistic Sense and Piece of Relationship, despite it being tied to Brutality. On floor 6 we go with the Evil Defining for the leg prosthetic. Line 3 was there and it was tempting, but right now I don't need to cheat death. At the shop we spent all the money we had on enhancing gifts we owned before going against Ahab and her lackeys. This fight can be scary, and since I'm already regressed, we can use this to overclock an ego to corrode, winning the fight in 2 turns. Looks like the fault lies with you, Ahab. We pick up the Harpoon prosthetic leg and lightning rod before moving on to line 1 Madness. After fusing the guiding lamp, we head into the boss room where we face off against the Blubbering Toad. Funnily enough, this is one of the bosses I struggle against during the daily thread runs, as it can nuke your sanity. So when I say I struggle against it, I mean Don usually kills everybody on my team, so now I just skip the fight every day, which actually results in more thread. Oh, it's dead. Wave 2 is KQE 1J23, and this one made me a little bit nervous, because it usually locks down one of your IDs, and since I only have one, what's going to happen? Never mind, it's also dead. Wave 3 is the solo leveling fight, one that gave me a lot of troubles in my last run. It's a really cool boss with a unique aesthetic, and funnily enough, this fight alone from my last run has made me really want to go back and rewatch solo leveling. Don ended up doing so much damage that 2 of the unkillable targets got obliterated. Wait, I don't think you're wait, what? You're not meant to be able to kill them? I've never seen that before. And 1 turn later, well, the main guy's dead too. Floor 8 throws a really hard choice. There are some amazing gifts from Miracle 20 and Motwe, or heartbreaking for the great tier 4 sinking gift. In the end, I chose Motwe, because I wanted to stay ahead of the difficulty curve, and we can get more gifts here that provide offense levels. We don't find anything that we're looking for, but we do start working towards Lunar Memory, and enhancing our plethora of fantastic ego gifts. This fight had me a little worried, so I slowly played the fight to get as many attacks as possible by the time that Cassetti appeared. Our HP was slowly dropping, but thanks to half the enemies opting to defend, it allowed us to ignore them and clash with those who are actually attacking us, healing in the process while mitigate damage being taken. Bring Sasha up, and bring Sasha down. So in comes the main man himself, Cassetti. We offset his evade, use an ego to reduce our sanity to its lowest point, to hopefully increase the damage output of all of our other skills. Except, we never got to use it. The skill order is still something that throws me off in Limbus, but the other skills going first actually saved us some ego resources. This time we go to do line 3, where Claire, the useless shit, fails me 2 vents in a row. I'm joking, buddy, I love you really, you carried my account in the very, very early days. At the shop we buy the melted eyeball and fused downpour. Now we just need the bell of truth, which we've passed up multiple times by now. The so-called boss for this floor is just 30 hard enemies, which Donna can one-shot, so now it's a race to get myself into regressed form before they deal too much damage to me. The healing passives are proccing left and right, healing Don for over 100 life, and now we're regressed. So the entire floor just falls to us, although we're now positive sanity, but using 2 skill 3s and getting 4 envy resonance will regress us next turn. A few turns later, they're all dead. We pick up the unhatched embers and tangled bones. For the final floor of Infinite, we go for Heartbreaking. There really wasn't a great option here, and I kinda wanted to test Butler style binding arts. At the shop we buy a few random gifts, but most importantly we find our Bell of Truth. The boss this time is regular Heathcliff, where we are slowly seeing the enemies catch up to us, as our clashes are only favoured now. A massive skill 3 from Dawn staggers Heathcliff, and 3 back-to-back skill 3s finishes the job. Sadly, Butler style would have given the enemies 3 clash power, so I went with pre-order discount and trial plan guide instead. For the first floor of Extreme, we chose line 5. The rewards on the way to the boss give us 2 tier 4 gifts that we can use to finally fuse Lunar Memory, before refusing the Crushed Memory gift. The boss was not easy, as we were not winning clashes. The only option is to use a corroded ego and hope that it either goes unopposed or against a target she can win against. A few resets later and we are successful, killing all of the IDs standing before us, corroding, allowing us to repeat this for the next floor. We broke 1 coin, but it still did enough damage to kill them all. Worried about how much damage they're about to deal with us, I opt to ego once more. While some survived, they are all staggered, so we use this opportunity to regress through Sin Resonance and skill 3s, ready for the Lone Gunman. Thanks to the skill replacements, we get a skill 3 for each slot, except 1, which we replaced for an ego, something that honestly I didn't need to do. The following turn we finished the job. Converting Thorn and Ruptured Bloodsack seem to have the least scary trials, though honestly at this point they're all scary. No adversaries for this run, I will be honest, but my next solo run I think I'm going to try and go for max adversities. Floor 12 and we pick up line 3, and what is this? A warning? This must be one of the secret bosses I've heard of, and although yeah, this might actually end my run, screw it, let's try it. Oh god, it's Vergilius. I've heard of this fight. Oh god, I'm screwed. Oh, this is the end of my run. Oh! Okay. think we staggered him. Woo! We get a unique gift from this encounter, Keikomi's mini gift, that seemingly empowers our ID's attacks. Almost all shopping stages at this point are literally just empowering whatever gifts we have, selling any useless gifts we picked up along the way, and empowering our gifts further. The first boss is Ambling Pearl, an easy fight, but at this stage of the run, is there such a thing? I ignore any attacks targeting the slimes, but it doesn't matter. Dawn's damage is so high that she staggers the boss with one attack, and almost kills it with the second. Turn 3 isn't quite the end of this boss, but it is now fully staggered with 300 life left. We keep our aggressed form for the next fight, so we can fire off an absurd amount of skill 3s, and on our next turn we actually finish off the Flaming Moth and move on to the final boss of the floor. Now though, we have all of our attacks. We offset the damage and fire endless skill 3s, but it only takes 3 to pick up the kill. We grab Sun Shower and Sundered Memory, and opt to go for Bride of Infinity, even though my last run I said this floor scared me, due to the enemies being unkillable for several floors. But I was feeling confident. We clash with the big guy and pray the others don't do too much damage, and thankfully they don't. Turn 2 I once again only clash with the big guy, hoping to stagger him, so I can now strategically keep everyone's staggers offset from one another. On turn 3 I staggered the other 2 enemies, but somehow ended up killing one. Turn 4 all damage is focused on the big guy, but somehow we again killed everybody else. Wave 2 is against the Shock Centipede, who eats several skill 3s, almost killing it. A few turns later the Centipede decides to implode when the turn starts, and now it's on to solo leveling. For the first time basically all run we're struggling in the clashes, but we are aggressed and we have a lot of skills, so let's corrode. Okay, what happened? I choose Final Power and Growth, and for the penultimate floor, who couldn't be Blood Fiends? By now most of our gifts are fully leveled up, and we finished the last fight at minus 45 sanity, so we're going into this one corroded, which is perfect. One ego wipes the entire floor of Blood Fiends out, and on turn 2 there are just 3 enemies standing before us, one of which is somehow staggered. So a few skill 3s later we move on to wave 2, once again regressed with multiple skill 3s. But sadly we're struggling, so we have to pull out the ego. Somehow a few Blood Fiends survived, but next turn we get 2 ego uses, though it only takes 1 to kill them all. For the last gifts of the run we grab Bio Venom Vial and Smoke and Wires, and for the last floor we run SEA. At the shop we get another Don skill replacement, so now we have replaced all of the skill 1s and 1 skill 2. On the final boss we are hopeless, no matter what we do, so I take the risk and I use an ego anyway. We do lose the clash, but it took me until now to realise that these are unbreakable coins. It's unbreakable coin. It's unbreakable coin. That's not... It's unbreakable! It doesn't matter if we don't win the clash. Over 4,000 damage with broken coins, killing half of the enemies and staggering one more. We get some unopposed attacks to target, so we fire a skill 3 and another ego, causing the King Trash Grab to make an appearance. I offset his defense and fire skill 3s into his other attacks, but sadly we lose the clash, and I finally get to see the Unhatched Embers in action. I offset the boss's defense and aimed 2 skill 3s and an ego into the now unopposed attack, resulting in our victory. Mirror Dungeon Extreme, solo, with Queen of Hatred Dawn. And so with that, my first ever Mirror Dungeon solo run had been completed. And I can safely say, for the first time in my entire YouTube career, I have finished a series. I set out to do a 4-part miniseries, and we've done a 4-part miniseries. I could add things onto this and do a solo run with different characters in the team, and I could do 50 adversaries and that sort of stuff. But I think just to say that I have finished a series, I'm going to say that this is the final episode of this 4-part miniseries. So where do we go from here? Well, I have about 4 or 5 days to try and quickly get through the intervalos between Canto 7 and Canto 8, to run Canto 8 and even do the intervalo that's just released, to try and get as much of the event rewards as I possibly can. So the next video or videos will be the intervalos and the Canto, and then after that, well, hopefully we can start planning out a whole new team. I think that would be really quite fun. But let me know if there's anything in particular you want to see. I'll be more than happy to do what I can. But until then, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all again very, very soon. Bye bye.